Some people claim that in Europe we're entering a new era of high unemployment and low growth. And they're basing that on assumptions about competition with China, low innovation activity, our high debts, and our aging population. I believe that those people are wrong. Although it's possible, if we get things badly wrong in our policy, to end up with higher unemployment than we had before, it's also possible to make things better, to end up with even lower unemployment than we had in the 20th century, and even a situation where we get more innovative activity and more growth. We simply need to be more careful about how we structure our policy. The view that we are entering a new normal situation with more unemployment, less job creation is based on the past, is based on what we experienced in the 20th century, where most job creators were the industrialists. Then late 20th century, the financial sector started growing fast, and financial services. I don't think that in the 21st century we're going to see more expansion of financial services and especially more expansion of industry. Neither is the key to our future. Although industry could be flourishing, and I hope that it is flourishing, and will flourish on the basis of innovation and higher productivity, not in terms of job creation. But there will be new sectors of job creation. We're going to get more jobs in the services. The question is what kind of services, and I believe the services that we need to concentrate on, because they'll be the ones that will absorb all the young people who are coming out of school and university, will be services like health, education, community services, where in the old days industry used to attract all early school leavers in long assembly lines. Now it's services where we're relying on person-to-person exchange, not on machinery and other kinds of capital. Those are the sectors that will attract these young people that used to go into industrial sectors. Business services might grow a little in Europe because we're behind the Americans, but again, I don't think they will grow very much. As an illustration of what I'm saying, you can see what's been happening in the United States, because it's still the leading industrial country in the West. You can see that industrial employment has been declining steadily. Government employment has been declining steadily. Financial services, the pink line, has been, and related services, mainly related to real estate management and so on, it's been growing very rapidly until about 2000, but it's been declining since then as well. The one sector that has had steady rise in employment have been health and education. You can see something parallel happening in Germany, the leading industrial country in Europe, but it is behind the United States in those trends, in that industry is still employing more people than any other sector in that decomposition I've shown you, although that wasn't the case in the United States. But here as well, we've had growth in health and education, growth in financial services up to 2000 again, but very fast decline in employment. That is not telling you that German industry is declining, far from it. In fact, you can take a very positive view of what's been happening in German industry from this, and that is saying that productivity has risen so fast that they can produce all these products that are exported throughout the world by employing fewer and fewer people. The question is what's going to happen to those people that are not getting employed there, and I'll show you in a minute. Now, focusing on employment rates in health and education, you can see that the sort of champion country, if you like, in those sectors is Sweden and the other Scandinavian countries. In fact, the reason for what many people call the employment miracle in Sweden and the other Scandinavians is provision of jobs in health care, things like child care, old people care. Now, of course, in Sweden, it's all done through the welfare state, heavily subsidized services provided through the market. And that does entail high taxation. I'm not saying that's the only route to get there, but that's the route they have chosen, and they're very happy there. When you look at surveys of life satisfaction throughout Europe, the Scandinavians are the happiest people of all in their responses. And the Southern Europeans, unfortunately, I regret to say, being from there myself, are the least happy people. You can see that to some extent here, in that the country that is really falling behind in all this is Italy, the only country I have from Southern Europe. It started off with Germany and in the provision of jobs in health and education until about 1918, but then it just fell behind and is still failing to expand. I'm also showing you employment rates in business services to show that the United States and the United Kingdom are ahead there. Sweden, again, comes third there, and the country that is badly falling behind is, again, Italy. There's obviously something that we need to do in Southern Europe to catch up with what I'm saying in terms of job creation. But I don't really think this is where our future lies in terms of absorbing the very large numbers of young people coming out of school. Now, the question of where are we going to go, what sectors are going to be the ones that will absorb labor and all that, it's been sort of bothering me for years and years now, and I'm pleased to say that we got some very good financing from the European Research Council, which is sponsoring this meeting as well, with research based at the University of Cyprus. And what I'm going to say next as sort of where I think that all this is leading to, although I should say that being an academic, I do need to have more evidence before I can be absolutely confident that this is where we're going. Now, let's start with innovation. There's no doubt that economic growth comes from innovation. We do need to innovate. We do need to provide the environment for more innovation in Europe if we're going to grow. That doesn't necessarily say that we need innovation to provide the jobs that will bring unemployment down to low levels. By low levels, I mean something like 5–6%. It helps if we innovate, and what I'm going to start telling you is how is the relation between innovation and job creation, because I think there is a lot of confusion, even in the press, in the financial press, but also in the way people think about innovation. There are also implications about demographics coming from innovation and growth, the aging populations. There are implications about trade. Those are not as important as the ones that come from pure technology. Now, when we look at the impact of innovation on employment, we find what economists might call an aggregation fallacy. And that works as follows. If you take an innovating company, then there is no doubt that the successful innovator will create jobs. And therefore, we just look at that sometimes and we say, innovation is creating jobs, so if we want to create lots of jobs, let's have more innovating companies and they'll do it. What we're forgetting, though, is that the innovator destroys jobs in what would be their competitors. If you take Amazon as an example, selling books through the internet, there's no doubt that Amazon has created lots of jobs. It's been a very successful company. But at the same time, lots of jobs by high street booksellers have been destroyed because of competition from Amazon. Put the two together, and you have job creation in the innovator, job destruction in the companies that haven't been innovating. What's been happening in the sector as a whole? Well, it's almost always the case that the number of jobs in the sector as a whole goes down from this innovation. I'm prepared to bet that there are now fewer person hours employed in selling €1 worth of books than used to be the case before Amazon came onto the market. Now, that's not the end of the story, though. Those associated with Amazon and with other innovators have become wealthier. They've got more money to spend. They spend their money on consumption goods, but especially they spend their money on the provision of services. They no longer have time to sit and look after sick relatives. They have no time to look after their children. They go and buy childcare services. They go and buy old people services. They buy more education for their children. Some even buy dog walking services because they don't have time to walk their dog in the park. All these are what I call labor-intensive services. You cannot mechanize those. You cannot mechanize healthcare, you cannot mechanize childcare. Therefore, there's a lot of job creation in those sectors. So when we now look at the economy as a whole, what we find is that the innovating company will gain employment. Google and Amazon have been growing and growing. The innovating sectors will lose jobs. The information provision sector has probably lost jobs because of Google. Book-selling sector lost jobs because of Amazon. But the non-innovating, labor-intensive service sectors have gained so much employment that in the economy as a whole, there's been net job creation. And that's where our future lies in terms of innovation. That's where the jobs are going to come from. In what appear to be the backward sectors, although all that is driven by the very, very few innovators. Now, there's aging population. Aging population pushes more along these lines because older people do have more demand for services. They expect more health services, for example. They are much happier to have other people doing their shopping, that kind of thing. That pushes in the same direction as innovation. We have trade implications. Successful innovators will export more. That, in fact, reverses the trend I was describing because it leads to even more job creation by the successful innovators. But again, trade is never so strong as to offset the tendencies that I described before. So what does all this mean for Europe now? What it means for Europe is that if we're going to not to sit back and wait for competition from China and other countries to take over and see our economies in decline, is that we do have to realize that where we're going to see the new jobs coming from will be health, education, maybe less skilled services, ones that are directly person-to-person interchange instead of the old-fashioned idea where someone was working on their own in an office or standing in an assembly line in an old-type industry. I don't think we should start campaigning for reindustrialization in Europe. It's not going to do much for us. We should be campaigning for innovation. That's great. But to campaign and subsidize job creation in industry, it won't get us anywhere. It will be a waste of money. Because successful industry nowadays doesn't need people. It needs innovation, technology, and machinery. Now, how can we make sure that happens, that we don't miss out? Well, that's where policy has a very important role to play. We need to liberalize our services. We're far behind in Europe. In fact, one of the countries that does need to do a lot of work there is Germany. It's a successful industrialist, but not very successful in liberalizing their service sector. We need to allow or even encourage high wages in these service sectors that I described, in the personal service sector, to attract good people. We shouldn't be in a situation where we say, well, if you're good at school, you should be going and working for a big manufacturer or for a big digital industry internet provider, but don't look at things like childcare and healthcare because you never go far. We should get away from that idea. We should encourage high pay. We should have labor market policies that are flexible, especially at the lower end of the skill distribution, that don't impose costs on companies from hiring new employees. Even if they're not very skilled, they can train them, maybe subsidize training on dealing with other people. And we shouldn't be having payroll taxes at the lower end of the wage distribution. Again, I'm very much in favor of excluding all jobs below a certain wage from paying any tax at all, Social Security contributions and the like, because we know that encourages a lot more job creation at that level. The same goes with minimum wage. We should be careful how we choose our minimum wage. I am, in fact, in favor of minimum wage, provided it doesn't start affecting the demand for labor because of high costs. But it's good to have a minimum wage up to a level because it encourages more supply of labor. It removes uncertainties, especially for young people. There is, I don't have time to go into it, of course, but there is research that shows where that minimum wage should be. In terms of demographics, well, health, which is the main product that older people require when compared with young people, is in many countries in Europe is in the hands of public finances. That's going to be a big problem, very, very big problem. We're already seeing it in Britain, in fact, where there is a national health service. We need to give incentives for people to stay in work longer because they're healthier, and then encourage at the same time the growth of more private sector participation in health. The reason I'm saying that is that I'm concerned about healthcare standards. If we are going to avoid having the standards reduced, we cannot rely on the state entirely. We have to rely on on the interplay between private sector and public sector. It's a very difficult problem, but at least that's the principle that should be guiding us in that respect. So overall, what can we say about it? Well, it's possible to have full employment. It's possible to have job creation to bring unemployment down to 5%. We need to be very careful how we plan this policy, especially for low incomes. And the things I mentioned, like providing subsidized training, something like apprentice training, having a good minimum wage, having no taxes, like Social Security contributions at the lower end of the market, are going to be critical. We need to rethink about all that. We need to rethink our education and health systems altogether. You know, one of the striking things about the new type of jobs is that it's direct customer service. You know, you deal with people directly in the new jobs where you are. But our educational systems don't train us to deal with people. They usually train us how to read books, how to read the internet, how to learn about history, things in the past. They don't teach us how to learn about other people and how to work with other people directly. That's absolute key. Our education should be restructured. We should introduce new courses that teach us how to deal directly with people. And if we do all those things, then we should be entering a new era of different types of economies, lots of job creation, low unemployment, and maybe reach the levels of happiness of the Scandinavians in the end. Thank you very much. Thank you.